Well, thank you for all the tolerance from everybody while we try to work out some technical kinks. You would think after all these years things would work, but I guess they don't. Anyway, so I'm Mark Schneider, I'm the director of IES, and I've been asked to welcome you all and thank you all for all the hard work that you do. Many of you know that this is actually the last time I will be meeting with you in my capacity as the director of IES. I have about less than 11 months left to my term of office, and I will be gone by the time you all get together in person next time. So I'm really sorry about that this is a meeting, Zoom meeting as compared to in-person meeting. I really do enjoy these meetings. So let me just hurry up and get through because we lost about 5 minutes of my allotted time, and I do want to leave some time at the end for any questions and answers. So I don't want to compare myself to Winston Churchill, who was, of course, a gifted orator, but he used to practice his speeches while sitting in his famous bathtub, drinking scotch and chewing on his big fat cigar. And he practiced so many times that when he actually gave the speech, it seemed natural and conversational. So I don't drink scotch anymore, I don't smoke cigars, and I don't have a bathtub. So any comparisons with me and Winston Churchill in that regard are forget about it. And anyway, of course, to claim to be as a good orator as he would be crazy. But I do, so I don't chew on cigars, but I chew on the points that I want to make as I walk to and from work, is when I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, which is increasingly frequent, and just start thinking about what in the world I should say. So the one thing I want to do is make sure I'm going to eschew all the boring stuff, like thanking everybody that needs to be thanked. And I just want to say that, all the people that you would assume helped make this meeting possible did in fact make it possible. So I just want to be, well, many of you know me, I can't be anything but pretty straightforward. So I want to share with you some of the priorities that I have for the remainder of my term, but I don't think the priorities that I'm going to stress in the next couple of minutes are idiosyncratic. I think they reflect some of the most basic challenges and challenges we have to deal with as a field. So there's an old real estate joke, you all heard it. What are the three things that matter with regard to real estate? And the answer is location, location, location. So we're more verbose baby than realtors, but I think that there are a couple of things that we need to care about, and not just location, location, location. So the first one I think is timeliness, timeliness, and timeliness, right? To just borrow the structure of the famous real estate line. If we keep working on things and we try to push forward and get to the fifth decimal point, and many of you heard me complain about the problem with the fifth decimal point, and it takes us months and years to get to that fifth decimal point, I think we're mistaken. Almost all the work that we do is probably to the left of the decimal point, and I think there's a false precision as if we push and push and push and look for better and better estimators to get to the fifth decimal point. The other thing that I think we need is translation. So I could say translation, 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 but the fact of the matter is that I've gone to many, many meetings where it seems that the audience for a presentation, especially research presentations, gets to be smaller and smaller and smaller and more esoteric and more esoteric. And I think that both our absence of timeliness and our absence of translation will ultimately come back and bite us. So we have to remember that IES money that you get through us is taxpayer money, and it ultimately is approved by the Congress. So to the extent to which that we fail to show that we are doing work that matters, that can change facts on the ground, that are timely, that solve the needs of policymakers, I think we lose a lot of our credibility. So again, timeliness and translation, I think, are things that have to be elevated in all our work. And I think if we don't do that, I think we're going to lose. The other thing that I want to talk about is ARPA for Ed. So you probably all know that we got $30 million on December 31st in the omnibus with the explicit purpose of launching ARPA-like activities within IES. We had actually asked for a new center, the National Center for Advanced Development and Education, NCAID, that would be a structure to house all of the ARPA-like activities. So there's ARPA, the original is DARPA, there's ARPA H, ARPA E, that's energy, Stellar E. There's IARPA, there's LARPA for labor. So there's ARPAs showing up every place. I'm not quite sure if it was a good move or not to, instead of calling us ARPA Ed, we're going with NCAID. So there are two possible avenues in which NCAID could be authorized this year. And I think we do need an independent structure rather than the way the money now is being channeled through NCER. So ESRA is up for reauthorization. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. And the NEED Act, sponsored by Bonamici and Fitzpatrick, it would be an act specifically to create NCAID and would not go through ESRA reauthorization. Both of these things are going on at the same time. So ESRA reauthorization is much more a Senate activity right now, Senate Help Committee, and NEED is a House committee activity. So what are the distinguishing characteristics of what I believe we will build ultimately with ARPA Ed? So the first thing is risk informed. So all our work has risks in it, but we don't talk enough about the risks that we take in our work. So we have a hit rate, a success rate, and again, depending on the success of your definition of success, that's in line with almost every other science agency scientific activity. But here's the difference. DARPA embraces failure. Science embraces failure, but somehow we don't. So I've said many times that the only failure with failure is our failure to learn, right? If we never fail, that means we didn't try hard enough, but we should never fail the exact same way twice. So we need to figure out failure. We have to have a much more risk-informed discussion of the work that we're doing, and we need to in ARPA Ed, NCAID, we're going to try to figure out how to create a portfolio of work that balances different risks. Because if we actually fail all the time, we're in trouble. But if we never fail, as I said before, that means we didn't try hard enough. So what are the characteristics? We need to embrace failure. We need to work on quick turnaround. We've been trying that, especially in the X Prize. We'll talk about that in a minute. But we need to speed up. We need to do quick turnaround work, and that's actually in the NEED Act. That's a very specific request, and the money that we got in the omnibus also calls for quick turnaround. We need to make sure that at NK there's a clear applied focus, so that we're talking much more about product development. We're talking much more about scaling. We're talking much more about commercialization. All of these things will be used to distinguish the work that we do in NCAID versus NCR or NICSR. Program managers and peer review have to be redefined for this purpose, for the purposes of NCAID. And we're working on language that will do that. And yesterday we met with a couple of people, with one person who's had a lot of experience with ARPAs, and he said the most important thing that ARPA could do, ARPA Ed could do, is to change what people think is possible. I love it, right? We have to change what people think is possible. And that to me is going to be one of the distinguishing characteristics of ARPA Ed or NCAID. So NCAID does not represent a dramatic break in the kind of work that we've been doing for the last few years. So, for example, we put out the Federal Register notice about our intent to publish a new transformation RFA. We did this once before. We've learned a lot about how to make the transformation RFA better, and a lot of it is building on the kind of work that we hope NCAID will do. So some of the things in there, a new approach to research practice partnerships that will emphasize bringing in tech companies, because so much of the work is all on ed tech, bringing in tech companies earlier. We're thinking about more gates, so that, for example, more gates that work has to go through in order to continue to earn funding. So there'll be a 6-month gate, for example, where we get a report on the partnerships, a year gate when we talk about the preliminary work. And these grants will be 3 years long, with an option for a 2-year renewal depending on progress. So, and we're also going to require a very specific analysis of risk. And this, of course, goes along with the SEER principles, et cetera. So we So we're thinking that the transformation RFA is sort of embodying all the lessons we've learned in the past few months as we've investigated and talked to people with regard to ARPAs. So we will also continue with prize competitions, but we've learned a lot from both our successes and our failures with regard to prize competitions. So we did recently, last week, we announced the winner of our digital learning prize, the X Prize, and we're thinking about how we can continue to push forward on our on prizes as part of IES's R&D work. So our most successful competitions to date have really been those that it's not the money that's driving them. It's the successful competitions have been based on the access to data, right? So it's data more than money right now that's becoming the distinguishing characteristic for us of successful prizes versus unsuccessful ones. And this is going to get even more important because generative AI depends on ingesting, love that word, right? Ingesting is like a big machine that's going to eat the world, large amounts of data. And unless we identify large data for education policy, education work, generative AI will not be as helpful to the field as it should be. So we put out an RFI a couple of months ago about, hey, help us find big data, the kinds of data that AI, generative AI needs to ingest. So the list is very sparse, sorry. And there are three sources of data that the government sort of owns that I think are the most important that we need to consider. And remember, we're talking about massive data, really, really big data sets that AI needs to improve. So FSA, Federal Student Aid, holds huge amounts of data, and it's locked down. So whether or not we could imagine a world in which some of that data could be available and ingested in AI machines by researchers, I mean, it's being used all the time by FSA. But the question is, could we make this more available to researchers? And I think that's a serious question that we all have to think about. NAEP, the National Assessment of Education Progress, is a huge data set that has not been used to the extent to which it should be. So we have in NAEP, we have hundreds of thousands of student essays, constructed responses that are just sitting there. And NAEP does a great job as the nation's report card, but it could do so much more. It could do so much more. It could use AI to improve the assessment itself, but also we could imagine a world in which we let the data out to researchers with restrictions to preserve privacy, and that the researchers could use these NAEP data in order to improve AI, in order to improve interventions, in order to improve student outcomes. I mean, it's a through line that I could imagine us pursuing, but that requires getting more and easier access to NAEP. The third big source of data is SLDS, State Longitudinal Data Systems. So in 2005, Congress authorized SLDS, and in the year since, we spent close to $1 billion on building SLDS in 49 states, DC, and some of the territories. Again, we spent almost $1 billion, and half of that money came around 2011 during the last fiscal crisis, the ARRA money. So we're talking about a system that we've invested about $1 billion in. All the big money was at least a dozen years ago. And I mean, you know what changes have happened with regard to IT, with regard to tech, with regard to data management, with regard to everything we know about IT is changed in those 12 years. So we need another infusion of money in order to make SLDS V2. We need to make that possible. We can envision all the pieces that would be required for SLDS V2, increased emphasis on interoperability, cloud-based structures, etc. I mean, we could imagine all these things, but the most important thing from our perspective is that these data need to have use cases built into any reauthorization and any increase in funding, use cases that would allow research access, easier research access to the SLDS data. So none of these things are new. None of these things are unheard of. We've been talking about them. They're all on the table with regard to Ezra. the reauthorization of ESRA. The Senate Help Committee put out an RFI a couple months ago asking for input with regard to the ESRA reauthorization, identification of issues. I'm not sure if any of you responded, but it's not too late. It's getting later and later. The Democrats, so the majority in the Senate Help Committee has pretty much drafted a bill. They sent it over to the Republicans last week, but it's not done, right? So you as citizens, you as concerned individuals, you as people who really need the kinds of data, the kinds of changes that we're talking about, you're citizens, you're American citizens, you should take the advantage of our citizenship and our democracy, and you should make your views and preferences known. So with that, I'm going to just open up the floor for, we have a few minutes for Q&A, maybe 5 minutes. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them now.
Mark, I could read you a question that we received. So the question is, during your tenure, you set specific priorities such as SEER principles, DARPA-style high-risk transformative projects, learning engineering, data dissemination, scaling applications. To what extent will we see continuity there after you retire from IES?
I have no idea. I mean, look, I was a political scientist for most of my life, and some of the issues that political scientists have dealt with are like trying to imagine a world in which the things that I do or any policymaker does while they're in office get embedded into legislation or embedded into structural activities that live past them. The fact of the matter is, what the next person that occupies this office will have their own priorities and push forward on those. I mean, I believe, and I hope I'm right, I believe that the kinds of things that IES has been working on for the last 5 years under my guidance are things that the field needs and that the nation needs, and that therefore many of them will be followed. I mean, I think I've said this before, I think the SEER principles are one of the most important things that IES has done. It's codified a lot of the work, and it's we're trying to build it into lots of grant applications and grant processes in order to make sure that these are best practices that are embedded in research activities. I think there's another question. Let's see. Christine, is there anything else?
One more question. Will there be more initiatives around AI and education?
Well, I'm going to tell a joke, sort of a joke. I mean, if we don't get buried in paper clips, that refers to one of the major arguments against AI. I think we will continue to push forward on AI work. I mean, so we did, and of course, it depends on what your definition of AI is. So we announced 2 AI institutes that are in partnership with NSF. So one is on speech language pathologies, and that's and that's great. I mean, I'm so excited about that one. It involves using AI for universal screening, using AI for development of treatment plans, and using AI to reduce paperwork burden on teachers and speech language pathologists. The other one, the second one, which we announced just a couple of weeks ago, again, the joint effort with NSF, is called Invite. And it recognizes and tries to build on a fundamental insight that we have, and that is the kids are not okay, as they say, right? I mean, we've done some, especially the school pulse. So let me back up for a second, because we originally and rightfully were so concerned with the decline in cognitive skills, as for example, as witnessed by the historic declines in NAEP skills, NAEP scores. But it's more than just cognitive decline. It's really the absence of development of social emotional skills with students. So some of this is like everybody you talk to have kids in school. Well, obviously not everybody, but far too many people, when you talk to them about their kids' experience in school, they report to the same thing. The kids are not okay. They, You know, they don't know how to behave in schools. Some of it is really destructive behavior. There's a, you know, as we've seen all this data on the increase in student unhappiness and suicidal thoughts, etc. I mean, it's really the social emotional cost of the pandemic. We were late to recognize them, but they're huge and they're really, really detrimental to our society. So Invite is going to be an AI assisted program to try to figure out how to better incorporate and master SEL, social emotional learning skills in classrooms. And I think that's really, really needed. Some of the data we've gotten from the School Pulse with regard to conditions in the schools are petrifying.
And we have one last question, and I think this was a good one to end on. How can we tell the story to the public about how the innovations that you speak of will impact the education of children?
So, you know, so I guess there are a couple of audiences that we have to consider, right? So one of the things that we know is that if we don't know who we're talking to, if we think we could talk to everybody with the same presentation, then we don't know, you know, we're wrong. We need to figure out exactly who we are talking to, and we have to couch the argument in those terms. So we talk a lot to legislators, right? Mostly on the federal level, because they're the ones that are giving us the money. It would be nice to point to more things that have evidence that they actually change facts on the ground. That's number one. Number two, I think our biggest audience is those state and local school administrators. And cracking that audience, if you will, is extremely hard. We have to have data that's timely and that's relevant to their problems and that they can understand. So we need to, I mean, we always have to keep this in mind, that that's a prime target for our work, and we need to be able to understand the needs of state and local education officials, and we have to be able to talk their language. We can't go in there and, you know, say, oh, here's a Bayesian estimator that's 100 times better than a frequentist estimator, and they'll look at you like, what are you talking about, right? So we need to think about that. Parents are really hard, and I'm not sure that we'll ever have a mechanism for dealing with parents. And of course, the other biggest audience are teachers. So we have thought a lot about how to get our information into the hands of teachers. We're getting better at it, but you know, the world of teachers, they talk to each other, they get all their information, they share things, etc. So we need to figure out how to talk to multiple audiences, which probably means crafting multiple messages. It's the same message, but crafting it different ways. I think that everybody understands, going back to the question about AI work, I mean, I think that everybody understands that AI is changing lots and lots of things. And I think, it clearly AI presents huge challenges to schools, to teachers, to parents, to kids, right? So we cannot ignore it, and we have to figure out how to best use it. So I mean, the AI institutes have gotten a lot of play in an elite circle. Whether or not we can't translate that into language that school administrators or teachers could understand or use just yet, because we just launched these programs. I think, you know, using AI and NAEP data or AI and SLDS data to help us understand what's going on in the schools and how to develop interventions that work better, I think people will understand that. I think, and the last thing I'll leave you with is and we're struggling with this, I think everybody is. What does literacy mean? What does literacy mean in era of ChatGPT or generative AI? I mean, clearly students still need to know how to read and know how to write, but how has that changed? How is that affected by generative AI? We see this every place: universities, high schools, middle schools, right? What does it mean to be literate? What are the skills that you need to navigate a world of ChatGPT? I mean, clearly a lot more of editorial skills are needed as compared to just writing skills. Crafting the right prompts is a skill that we have to teach and that we have to have students master. All right, we're already over time. So, well, thank you all. You all have my email address. You know how to reach me. You all know that I respond. So if there's anything that you wanted to ask and didn't, please feel free to reach out. And again, I'm really sorry that this is in person. I'm sorry, on Zoom rather than in person. It would have been a lot more fun if we were all together. So we're going to have a quick clip introduction. Thank you from Secretary Cardona. So Miguel Cardona was sworn in as the 12th U.S. Secretary of Education on March 2nd, 2021. He has 2 decades of experience as a public school educator from Meriden, Connecticut, which, by the way, is the same school system that he attended as a child. Secretary Cardona earned a bachelor's degree from Central Connecticut State University, a master's degree, 2 additional advanced leadership certificates, and a doctoral degree from the University of Connecticut. So with that, I turn the screen over to the Secretary. Thank you all.
Hi, I'm Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the 2023 Annual Principal Investigators Meeting. I know you have a packed agenda, but I want to take a moment to thank you. Your work helps real people. I'm talking about people like the college admissions director, working to boost enrollment after some steep declines because of the pandemic. The district hiring teams, aiming to diversify the local teacher workforce. The special education administrator, looking for evidence-based practices to support children with disabilities. The school principal and classroom teacher drawing on findings from IES-funded research to help accelerate learning for their students. And we can't forget the new education scientist receiving invaluable mentoring and gaining knowledge, all while working to deepen our evidence base of what works in education. You're making a real difference. I've spoken a lot lately about raising the bar. That means achieving academic excellence, boldly improving learning conditions, and creating pathways for global engagement. Raising the bar means all students can reach new heights in the classroom, in their careers, and in their lives and communities. A huge part of raising the bar is ensuring that states, schools, and districts have the tools they need to help students thrive. You already know this. Raising the bar is built into the very DNA of IES-funded research. Because of you, IES has built a strong foundation of robust, useful, and truly excellent evidence in education. For 20 years, you've conducted the highest quality research and shared data with those who need it. As the best and brightest in the field, you know your work continues. It's as urgent as it is necessary. And as a nation, we must act to address historical inequities in education, even as we continue healing from the pandemic. In partnership with schools, districts, and communities, we will meet that goal. We will close achievement gaps. We will support students' mental health. We will recruit and retain great educators. And we will help schools nurture strong partnerships with parents and families. This annual meeting is a great opportunity to come together to share best practices and to get re-energized for the work ahead. Right now, President Biden is prioritizing R&D at unprecedented levels. Let's use this focus on innovation to work more quickly, more collaboratively, and more deliberately than ever before. It's no exaggeration that our future depends on high-quality research and talented researchers like all of you. Our future depends on the solutions you'll discover as we work together to overcome challenges and identify opportunities in education, including special education. Thank you for your commitment and your dedication to this work and for committing to making sure our students have the best experience possible. Enjoy the rest of the meeting.